Hello and welcome to my first ARC review. If you've watched any of the videos on our channel, you know that Amanda typically does all the ARC reviews. I haven't had one that I had read independently from any we have read together for a vlog, and I was lucky enough to get an ARC recently that I was really excited to get, mostly because I'm a huge fan of The Silent Patient by Alex Michalides, and I happened to get an ARC of The Fury, which is by the same author. I absolutely loved the twist in Silent Patient. I read it back in 2020 during the pandemic, and I remember staying up to 4 o'clock in the morning, riveted to get to the end of that book and know what happened, and the huge twist just got me. I absolutely loved that book. Now, I had huge anticipation for his second book, The Maidens. Probably way too high expectations, and I ended up not liking that one so much. It might have been mostly to the high expectations. So when I got this one, I didn't have as high expectations as I did with The Maidens, though I still was excited and thought, okay, there's a chance it could be really as good as The Silent Patient. I did really enjoy this book. I don't think anything is going to match the level of how I felt with The Silent Patient. I think that was just a first time, and it's hard to match that level. But I definitely loved it more than I love The Maidens. So this book, and just so you guys know, I'm not going to do any spoilers. I'm going to try my best not to give away too much, because I feel like you would enjoy it more if you didn't know all the details. So I do recommend this book, especially for anyone who read The Silent Patient. And I just thought it was a really good, like, murder mystery, I would call it. I think it's in line with Agatha Christie, though there are twists in it. And that's what I want to really try not to say what the twists are. So this book, and why it's called The Fury, is it takes place on a Greek island, and there is a weather phenomenon there with the wind. It's just known to be like this really catastrophic type like weather event there. And they're in the Greek islands. It's a private island because one of the characters, whose name is Lana, she's a movie star, and her now deceased husband had bought it for her. She has brought along some friends, Kate, who is an actress as well, Elliot, Lana's husband, Jason, and Lana's son, Leo, as well as a assistant, I would call her. I don't think she's like a housekeeper, but she kind of helps Lana with everything, like taking care of the house. And there's also a chef on site too. All of these characters come together. And at first, you're introduced by a narrator, and you don't know who that narrator is. It is one of the people I just named, but they don't introduce themselves. And you also, at the beginning, are told there's a murder. And all you know that there's a body and that someone is dead. So all of that was intriguing. I thought it had a really good beginning. I felt the middle was a little clunky. You do realize who the narrator is pretty early on, but I also feel like it's an unreliable narrator. I was very cautious as I went through this book because I felt the information I was given wasn't reliable. And it might be because his other two books, that's very true as well. So I just kind of was taught not to trust what the narrator was telling us. So throughout the middle, I feel like it was clunky. The middle is about the relationships between these characters. Lana is friends with Elliot. They've been friends for a while, and I remember thinking a lot of times, like, why are they friends? Because she's supposedly this really gorgeous movie star, and I feel like the portrait of Elliot isn't giving someone that would necessarily be friends as close as is being described together. And you find out the relationship and the feelings about the characters between each other is what's motivating this story. The more you find out about the history and what's behind when they first met and what's going on in secret between some of these characters is really going to drive the second half of this book. And I do feel like it was a little surface. Like it's not a very deep story. You're not going to have very well-rounded characters, I guess I would say. It's very superficial in the way these characters are drawn. So I do think that's might be what it's lacking, is you don't really feel a huge pull towards, at least I didn't, to any of these characters. I feel like I wasn't really rooting for any of these characters, and that's probably the biggest miss for this story, and why I didn't like it as much is the characters and what you're learning about it. But having read the whole book and even thinking about the ending as I did, and doing some digging into the connections that I made after I read it, I think it could have been on purpose, is all I'm going to say. I don't want to say the spoiler, but I feel like there was purpose for why it was written the way it was. I might be reading too much into it, or I'm possibly giving too much credit, but that's a working theory that I have for it. But the last half of this book I felt was really good, especially the ending, and something that happened at the end kind of sat with me for a day after I read it, and it was nagging me. And I actually reread it today before I'm doing this video, and I looked something up, and it was right. I was right about it. And all I want to say is, if you've read The Silent Patient, you should definitely read this if you like that, because I do feel like there's a tie-in here. I'm not exactly sure what to make of it. So that is something I really need to talk to someone about too. So essentially, this book is like a murder mystery, and you're finding out all the backstory to these characters in the middle and towards the end, and you find out what happened with that murder, and then there's obviously several twists at the end as to what you think you know. And I hope that isn't considered a spoiler, because I don't want to ruin this book for anybody, because I do feel like there's some good parts, especially at the end. So to summarize, it's a really easy read. I feel like it's especially going to be enjoyable for those who have read The Silent Patient, and I think it's worth getting to the end through the clunky parts. I did give it I rounded up to a 4. I would say it's like a 3.5 for me. I did give Silent Patient 5 stars. So I do think it's worth your time. It does come out in January. If you've also read an ARC, or if you're viewing this in January after you've read it, or you just picked it up or are thinking about picking it up, please let me know your thoughts. If you saw anything that I didn't, also with any connections with Silent Patient, try and keep the comments spoiler free. You can always email us. The email address is on our info page. So thank you for coming along with me on my first ARC review, and hopefully I'll have more in the future. And until next time.